So I did a post recently about women who have a high number of children, and this commenter responded. He says, they said, the people I've met like this usually are narcs or victims. The woman is usually on government assistance, no shade. And I want to respond to this. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. And so I want to respond to this because this is certainly a huge aspect of, of people who have a lot of children, where they are using their children to get a better life. And this is something I've spoken about not just on this post, but it's also something I've spoken about as it relates to people who are using their children for fame on social media. So there's a number of ways in which people use their children to manipulate and get resources, money, all of that sort of stuff. And certainly having a high number of children, people tend to do that. So I'll give you an example, and I don't know, I think I used it in the original post, but I'm not sure. But this is exactly the person that I had in mind when I did the original post, where I talked about how there was this woman I used to work with years ago, and she would bring her children in. They would be unkempt, unbathed, no shoes, and she would bring them into the workplace. And she would use her children to, and this isn't necessarily talking negatively about anybody, so I'm not trying to gloat, but I'm using this more as an example. But she would use her children to garner sympathy from all of the coworkers. It got to the point where um, the coworkers, were paying for her children for all major holidays. Plus, there were donations in between. So people were donating money, people were buying clothes and shoes, and just constantly giving to this woman. We were her and her children's Santa Claus, because the initial impression was that I'm in this destitute situation, even though she had a man in the home. That this is way back when I was about, maybe 20. She had a man in the home, and she had all these children. And so then next year she would pop up pregnant. So on top of the children that her company, her fellow employee friends, were already paying for that, and it was disrespectful. And everybody would be like, what the heck? You're having trouble. You're kind of in this situation with all these kids, and here you go popping up with more. And so it would happen year after year. Each year that I worked there, she had a child. Year after year, same thing. And she would bring in new children, garner sympathy. And, she was on assistance, just like you said. But everywhere she went, it was more so like, I'm destitute, even though she had a full grown, capable man in her home, and both of them were capable of working. They would just, get children, and they would use their children to that advantage at any time. And not just us, the employees at her job, but also her parents, his parents, anybody that could give and could get, she could get on account of those children, she was going to use that and take advantage of it. And I said, I'm not dealing with it anymore. And I got to the point, it's probably bad to say, but I don't care. I didn't even want her at my desk. I don't, because I don't like when people like sort of parade around and are the perpetual victim. So I got to the point where can you step away from my desk? I don't like that. In that kind of way. I got like that with a few of my the people that I work with. I'll share a story on one later if you guys want to hear about it. But, I didn't like manipulative people hanging around. I don't like people that are taking, that are, sort of playing on the good nature and the good spirit of people, meanwhile, there's no consequence for their actions. And that's the thing, is like, these types of people are very good at navigating a system and where they can, use other people and there's no consequence on their actions. So they're constantly seeking out and often getting are the recipients of government resources in the community. There's always a way that they're finding, and they typically get what they want. And not only do they typically get it, but there's a level of entitlement to it. Like, well, I got these kids, and it's not just the resources as well. It's also, back in the day when I was working in an office like this, it would also be like uh, priority things with work as well. Well, I've got to leave early. I've got kids. I've got to come in late. So I've got kids. So everybody else who doesn't have kids or who can be on time and show up to work, we all have to pick up the slack. Same thing for holidays. It used to be they would get priorities for time off or holiday off. Well, Natalie, you can't get off because so and so with the kids they've got the kids, so they need it more than you do, and because you don't have children, you can't get it. And it would be a point of contention where it was like, okay, you're getting donations, you're getting money, you're getting all these resources, but you're also getting priority at work as well. And me, I'm kind of, like at a certain point, I got to the point where I had to give a shit what was going on and who had what. I don't care. It's not my problem. I come to work just like they come to work, and we can't just start prioritizing people because they have chosen to put themselves in certain situations. I shouldn't be punished because I like for my life to look a certain way, which is organized, in order, and making sure that I don't bring in additional people in my life that or things that I can't care for. I'm sick of being punished, and I don't give a shit what's going on. And that's kind of how I rode that wave out, in my career. So my manager would come and be like, Natalie, nope, I don't want to hear it. Whatever you're getting ready to tell me no about, I don't want to hear it. And I don't care if there's consequences of me being fired at this point, because I work hard and therefore I'm an adult. Why do I even need to be babysat and ask for time off at a job whatever. Anyhow, but that's kind of it. But people do use their children. People like this also dispose of their children once their children can no longer bring in those resources and perks. Either they dispose of them or they turn around to their children and they play that guilt and blame game. I raised you. I was on benefits. I did all this for you. And now you're going to leave me down and out destitute. So they still look for that handout, either that, from their own children, or you are of no use to them, and they don't care. It is very much a perpetual victim by proxy, by using your children to kind of get you out or to get you paid. And it's very interesting. I also think this concept of, being a village, right, for mothers and things like that. And these are the types of people that would want you, they would stress the importance of being a village and pulling together when it comes to them. But when it's you're single, or anybody else, these types of people are nowhere to be found. So I want to put this out there. I want to thank you so much for saying this. Again, this is not meant to be disrespectful to anybody, but it's meant to be a conversation. This is something that really happens. I've experienced it, and honestly, I wouldn't tell you guys anything on the internet that I would have no problem telling the person who asked, and manipulated those resources from me. And I have done that. I have been known to do that with women, not in a nasty way, but just in a way that like is a boundary. Like, I'm sorry, you're using. I'm very protective when it comes to children, even when they're not mine, and children being respected. but I'm also very protective of myself and those boundaries. So thanks so much. Hope that helps.